Ready for a deep dive. Today we're going to be going back in time about 2,500 years, back to ancient India, and we're going to be using a 6th grade history textbook, our past sci. It might sound kind of surprising to use something so simple, but trust me, there's some really cool stuff in here. We're talking about a time when iron tools were just starting to change the game for agriculture. Villages were booming, turning into towns and cities, and trade routes. They were going global.
You're spot on about that time period. 2,500 years ago, that was huge. See, before that, life in India was mainly rural. People were using stone tools. Agriculture was pretty basic. But things were on the verge of a major shift, a major shift.
The textbook mentions iron tools and how they impacted agriculture. I mean, we just take iron for granted these days, right?
It's hard to imagine just how revolutionary it was. We're not just talking about better tools. This was a domino effect, changing everything. The iron plowshare, for example. Farmers could suddenly cultivate way more land, bigger harvests, and guess what that means? Surplus food.
Okay, so that's surplus. That's where things get interesting. The book talks about them finding all these iron tools and weapons in megalithic burial sites. And not just a few, the largest collections. Makes you wonder about the people they buried them with. Powerful warriors, maybe. Master craftspeople.
It's a glimpse into their social structure. It tells us that whoever had iron, even back then, they had status, influence, and as you said, that surplus. It wasn't just about individuals, it was transforming entire communities.
More food, more people, bigger villages.
Exactly. It leads to a population boom. And those villages, they needed to become more complex to handle all those people. That's where we start seeing different social groups emerge. The Velar, for example, they were the wealthy landowners. Then you had the Uzavar, the farmers working the land, and of course the village headman, the Grama Bujaka.
The Grama Bujaka sounds important.
He was key. Think of him as the mayor, judge, and tax collector all in one. And it wasn't an elected position either. It was hereditary, passed down through families, like royalty.
Wow, talk about power. The textbook also mentions the Kadaisiar and Adamai. Who were they?
The laborers. Some were slaves, unfortunately. It's a reminder that even with all this growth and progress, not everyone benefited equally. The Adamai, they really highlight the darker side of this social structure.
Definitely makes you think about the complexities. Different levels of power, different opportunities, all because of iron.
Exactly. And as those villages grew, they needed a way to support all those people. That's where irrigation comes in. People had to get creative.
Yeah, the textbook talks about them creating canals, wells, tanks, managing water in a big way. I wonder what those early irrigation projects were like. Must have been massive undertakings, right?
They were. And they would have needed some serious engineering skills. Think about the planning, the coordination.
Yeah.
And all with limited resources.
Yeah.
It says a lot about their ability to innovate, adapt to the challenges.
It just goes to show you, our ancestors, they were just as smart and capable as we are today. Just working with what they had. Different tools, different knowledge.
I completely agree. Speaking of ingenuity, the textbook tells this great story about a kid named Prabhakar. Gives us a real glimpse into daily life back then.
Prabhakar. Right, it's all about him going to the village blacksmith, isn't it? What kind of details do we get? What was life like?
We see Prabhakar walking through the village, probably passing by houses made of mud and thatch. Maybe he sees women getting water from the well. You can almost hear kids playing, laughing in the streets. And the smells. Imagine the spices coming from someone's kitchen.
It's like you're there.
Yeah.
Then he gets to the blacksmith shop. The textbook describes the heat of the furnace, that rhythmic clanging, sparks flying everywhere.
That blacksmith. He would have been crucial to village life. Just like the Grama Bojaka. Everyone needed him. Farmers needed tools. Warriors needed weapons. Even families needed simple things, like cooking pots. And it was all made from iron.
Everyone was connected, dependent on each other.
Exactly. And that idea of interdependence, it went beyond the village, too, especially as trade routes started to expand and connect people across huge distances.
Speaking of trade, the book introduces this bustling city, Mathura. It was at the crossroads of all these major trade routes. Sounds like the place to be. So you've got these villages, new technologies, and bam, cities start popping up. Like Mathura, the textbook talks about it a lot. What made it such a big deal?
Location, location, location.
Well,
think about it. Major trade routes, all coming together right there in Mathura, connecting it to the rest of India. And even further, it was like a trading superhighway, perfect for business and for cultures to mix.
The textbook also says Mathura was known for its fine sculpture. Those artists must have been rolling in it.
For sure. They weren't just working for the local big shots either. You had all these rich merchants passing through, goldsmiths, blacksmiths, weavers. Everyone wanted a piece of their work.
It's wild to think about. Those objects, a beautiful necklace maybe, or a tapestry, traveling all those miles, ending up who knows where.
And it wasn't just stuff. Imagine the stories, ideas, religions, all being shared along those routes. The book mentions Mathura had Buddhist monasteries, Jaina shrines, even Krishna worship, a real melting pot.
Like a mini version of the world back then, just that smaller. Makes you wonder how far these connections really went.
And that is where things get really interesting. The textbook points to Irrigation. That's a perfect example.
Irrigation. Remind me, where was that again?
It was a port city, bustling. On the southeast coast, think modern-day Puducherry. What made it so special was its link to Rome.
Wait. Rome. As in the Roman Empire. Across the world, Rome. Seriously.
Seriously. Archaeologists found all kinds of stuff there. Roman pottery,
Yeah.
amphorae, those tall jars they use for wine, and even Aretine ware. That was from a city in Italy.
Roman pottery in India. That just blows my mind.
It tells you something. Ancient trade routes, way bigger and more complex than we sometimes realize. Everyone talks about the Silk Road, right? But sea routes, equally important, connecting India to every corner of the globe.
Globalization. It's not new. People have been doing it for thousands of years. So you've got these ships sailing across the ocean, Roman stuff to India. How was India trading back? There's that poem, something about a poem, from the Sangam collection.
Ah, yes, that poem. It's amazing. It paints this vivid picture. All the things everyone wanted from India. Pepper, pearls, beautiful textiles, sandalwood. You can practically smell it. Those ships, loaded with treasures, spices filling the air.
Not exactly everyday stuff, right? I mean, we just grab pepper from the grocery store. But back then, pepper was a big deal. Black gold.
Exactly. Everyone wanted it. That demand for pepper and other spices, it was driving trade across the world. It wasn't just about luxury. It was changing cuisines, economies, cultures.
It's crazy, something we totally take for granted, but it helped shape the ancient world.
It did. It shows just how connected everything already was.
Yeah.
And all those connections. They didn't just change what people ate or wore. It even changed how societies were organized. Who had power?
It makes sense. The book talks about these new kingdoms rising up along the coasts. The Cholas, the Cheras, the Pandyas. They must have been fighting to control all that trade, right? All that black gold.
You bet. Those sea routes were the key, whoever controlled them. Major power. And those kingdoms, the Cholas, the Cheras, the Pandyas, they weren't just greedy. They were smart. They knew how to play the game.
The textbook says they didn't always collect taxes in the usual way. They got gifts, tributes.
Isn't that fascinating? Imagine it. These rulers being showered with jewels, exotic animals, even elephants, all to show loyalty. It's a different way of thinking about power. Building alliances through gifts, strategy.
And they weren't just hoarding all that stuff, right? The book says even poets were getting in on the action. They got gifts too. Makes you think. Every good ruler needs a good storyteller.
Exactly. Those poets, they were vital. They told the stories that made the rulers look good, legitimized their power, made sure people remembered them. They wrote songs, poems, praising their victories, their generosity, their connection to the divine. It was propaganda, sure, but it was also art. And some of it, it's still around today.
History is wild, always being written, even when it's not actually written down. It's in the stories, the songs, the objects we keep.
So true. And exploring this world of ancient India, even just through a 6th grade textbook, it's remarkable. These ancient civilizations, they're not so different from us.
What a ride. Prabhakar and his village life, the bustling city of Mathura, trade routes stretching all the way to Rome.
All that from one book.
It just goes to show you, curiosity, it can take you anywhere. You just got to ask questions, even about the simplest things. You never know what you might find.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening, the next time you're holding something, anything, maybe it's a coffee cup or a salt shaker, take a second. Think about the journey it took to get to you.
Think about who made it, who sold it, the stories it could tell if it could talk, just like those things they dug up in Arikamadhu. Ordinary objects can be like time machines, reminding us that we're all connected and that humans, we've always been capable of amazing things.
Beautifully said.
A huge thank you to you for joining us on this incredible deep dive. And to our listeners, thank you for coming along for the ride. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those aha moments coming.
Yeah, talk about a power grab.
Right, control those routes, control the flow of goods, and, well, you control a lot. And these new kingdoms, the Cholas, the Cheras, the Pandyas, they weren't just after riches. They were sharp. They knew power when they saw it. The textbook even says they didn't always do taxes the normal way. Like, they got gifts instead. And tributes.
That's so right. Wild, huh? Imagine these rulers, people bowing down, offering them jewels, rare animals, even elephants,
Yeah.
just to stay on their good side. It's like a whole different way of thinking about power. Forget taxes. Give me a herd of elephants.
Strategic gift giving.
Exactly.
And those gifts, they weren't just gathering dust. The textbook mentions poets. Poets were getting gifts from these rulers, too. Makes you think. Behind every great leader, there's a poet taking notes.
It's true. Those poets, they were important. They were the storytellers. They made the rulers look good.
Yeah.
Powerful, important. They wrote songs about them, poems, praising their victories, their kindness, even how close they were to the gods. It was propaganda for sure.
Yeah.
But it was art too, some of it. And you know what? Some of those poems, they're still around.
History is everywhere, huh? Even when it's not written down. It's in those stories we tell. The songs, the objects people held onto for so long.
Totally. And it's been so fascinating to explore this time in ancient India. Even just scratching the surface with this 6th grade textbook, it's amazing. These ancient civilizations, they weren't so different from us.
It's been quite a journey. Prabhakar, just a regular kid going to the blacksmith, all the way to Mathura, this booming city, and those trade routes, spanning the globe, all the way to Rome. And to think, we just started with one book.
Amazing what a little curiosity can do, right? Just
Yeah.
asking questions, even about simple things. You never know what you might discover.
So true. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. But before we go, a message for our listeners. Next time you pick something up, anything, your phone, a pencil, whatever, take a minute. Think about how it got there. All the people who made it, all the places it's been.
Exactly. Just like those amazing things they found in Archimedes. Sometimes, the most ordinary things can be like little time capsules. They remind us that we're all connected across time and across the world. And they remind us that we've always been capable of incredible things.
That is a great thought to end on. A huge thanks to you for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been amazing. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into history. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those aha moments coming.